Cyclone Freddy has left behind it a trail of destruction and deaths. Over 1,000 people have been killed and more than 1 million displaced in Malawi, Mozambique and Madagascar. It is believed that the cyclone brought 6 months' worth of rainfall to southern Malawi in just 6 days, causing devastating floods and mudslides that destroyed homes, roads and bridges. Cyclone Freddy first hit Madagascar and Mozambique in late February before moving back out over the Indian Ocean, gaining more power and then making a rare course reversal to hit the mainland a second time. Recovery efforts in these countries, particularly in Malawi, have not been easy. The country was already reeling under the impact of cholera before the storm hit. President Lazarus Chakwera has been reaching out to the rest of the world for help for all the districts that have been affected by the climate event. But the question is, has the world listened? Let's find out today on The Square as we gauge the state of recovery in Malawi. I am Keminni, Amanor, and you're welcome to The Square. Joining us today are Mbawo Traveler. She's editor and consultant based in Malawi. We also have George Jobe, who's executive director of Malawi Health Equity Network. Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to The Square. I want to start off with you, George. Fantastic. I want to start off with you. We know that Malawi specifically was hard hit by by the tropical storm, which began as a cyclone. Talk to us about how recovery has been for the country the last 4 weeks.
Of course, we are still living behind the effects of the cyclone. Malawi was hit.
Well, George, it seems that network want to let us hear you. So I'm going to pass on the question to Mbawo and see if she can hear us better. Mbawo, talk to us about how recovery is ongoing in Malawi now.
The biggest problem also now is the road network. Actually, I live right in the heart of Blantyre. I went out today. I wanted to visit another part of the location where I stay, and I had to turn back midway because the road is gone. And this is right in the heart of Blantyre. There are other areas which are not accessible at the moment. We are not yet sure of the extent of the damage. And most of the people who have received help, they've received help from the private citizens initiatives and maybe non-government organizations. But the Department of Disaster Management, that is under government, has not reached all those areas because some are inaccessible at the moment. And I can tell you it's a very dire situation. And for the government to recover the road network, it will take a long time and a lot of money.
Long time and a lot of money, and I hope that we can just touch a bit more a little later in our discussions. But George, I come back to you. We know that originally 676 people had been declared dead. The 528 or so who could not be found were later declared dead because of events that for obvious reasons. Essentially, that's what I want to say. But after the mass burial, there's still a lot of things for those who were affected, those who survived the cyclone to do. Tell us how people are picking up back the pieces of their lives.
We can say that apart from the physical destruction, which my colleague has shared, there's also trauma, mental health issues, because the people have not only lost their relations, but they have also lost property, they have lost their houses. And we have people who are coming to the health issue in consideration of chronic illnesses. We talk about the NCDs, like the So we have people that they lost their passports and also their medication that needed to be refilled. So we know that the Minister of Health has been sharing with us that it has been doing an assessment, but we would want those people to be on medication as quickly as possible.
So, George, if you can hear me, I trust that you're making very salient points. The problem is we can't hear you because of your network challenges. So what my producers will do is we'll get you over the telephone so we can hear you more clearly. In the meantime, I'll go on with the conversation with Mbao, but I also bring in Maziko Hisbon Matemba, who is a health activist and executive director for Health and Rights Education Program in Malawi. Maziko, it's good to see you again. But Maziko,
thank you so much.
Perhaps you can take off from where George stopped because of the network challenges. How are people that you have encountered picking up back the pieces of their lives?
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, indeed, Tosin, that we still have problems, more especially the people who have interacted, because as activists, we are trying to collect data and see how people are faring the aftermath of the cyclone. Because we know that this might take a bit longer, looking at the situation on the ground, because Malawi as a country, we didn't prepare for it, and our disaster preparedness is not well supported in terms of resources. So when things of this nature comes into being, it means the country is faced with a lot of challenges. Of the people whom I've met, I think it's a sad moment that I managed to meet some orphans who have lost both parents. I have in mind Sosten, who have recorded what happened on that fateful day when he lost both parents. But also I have interacted with some of the people who have lost properties. And we are starting to find out, government is trying to find out on how these people can be supported. And I know it will be a big issue because already the areas which were affected already were declared disaster-prone areas. So there are a lot of things which is happening to make sure that some of the things have been done. But yes, want to thank countries because countries have supported Malawi in terms of the food, also rescue mission. But we still have people who are still on the ground which haven't been recovered as yet, because I think the damage was so huge, and also the debris which I think came out of the cyclone affected us largely. So in brief, I think that's what I can mention.
Very well. So Maziko, are you saying that despite the rescue operation ending, recovery is now going on? Recovery of perhaps corpses is going on now?
Yes, we still have recovery, yes, taking place.
I see. I'm going to come back to you. Wonderful. I'm going to come back to you and then we'll talk a bit more about that. But let me move on to Mbao now. Mbao, I want us to look at what the government has been doing so far for the people. The Malawian government had made clear from, off the bat that it would be challenging for it to do this alone. How would you put in words how you think the government has fared in reaching out to the people who survived Cyclone Freddy?
The government did try because it was the government that was coordinating with the foreign governments like Tanzania, Botswana, Zambia, who came in to assist us. But one good thing, I would say it's a good thing that came out of this is how the citizens came together. Because this time it was no longer a question of waiting for the government to come in. The people had to come in immediately. Private citizens did their part. It was something so commendable to see. And as of now, the government is decommissioning the camps because some of those who were sheltering in schools, the children have to go back to school. So initially, this is really about us as Malawians coming together, not necessarily looking to government to assist, because it was a disaster that was totally unexpected. And we all know that the government was overwhelmed. Definitely, it was a surprise. And this happened right in the heart of town, like in Blantyre, even in the area where I live, where you do not expect the damage that is there. So the government did its part, is doing its part, but the citizens are the ones who rallied and came together.
I see. Maziko, tell us what the data is telling you so far. You mentioned earlier that there's still some data collection going on. What are you seeing from what you have collected so far?
The data we have collected, we see that a lot of people still need support because, yes, the government, as Bao has mentioned, they've been decommissioning the camps. But despite decommissioning the camps, others are lucky enough, maybe they're going back to their relatives, maybe other towns. But most of the people who are residing in that area, others have nowhere to go. So we're trying to find out which ones are stuck in the whole thing, because others had properties, so many properties around the disaster areas. So we are still recollecting, getting some real facts on the ground. As Bao mentioned, that there are some goodwill people who came to support, others are doing some activities to support the recovery effort in terms of building houses for those who lost almost everything. But in a nutshell, because, for example, the site which I visited, that is one site, which is in Manja. You are about 400 farm families, and that's a huge 400,000 farm families. And if you add that ones into families which are at the minimum of 5 or 6, it's a lot of people who have been affected directly. So people are trying to resettle, but it's becoming tougher. And that's why we're urging government to do more. They have done more, but to make sure that, how do you make sure the people who are suffering on this nature, most especially the ones who have lost almost everything, they nowhere to go, where are those going to go? Because others, yes, they have resettled maybe using others, even though we know they're also still suffering, because maybe they've gone to their relatives and others within town. But we believe there are others. For example, in the likes of Palombe, Chilazulu, where I think almost the whole village went out. And those ones, they also need to be supported. They might be stay longer in camps.
Very well.
So at the moment, what we are doing, yes. At the moment, what we're doing, we are about to finish the data for Blantyre. We're expecting to see data for other districts which also had hit, and then we compare so that when we're discussing with Dortmund government and partners, at least we have real data which they can start thinking through on how
I'd want us to look at, indeed, I want us to look at some numbers when I come back to you, Maziko. But let's go to George now. If you just joined us, George Jobe is Executive Director for Malawi Health Equity Network. Now George is joining us over the phone. That's a difficult one to say, George and joining. But George, let's talk about equitable distribution of relief items to the people who are affected by this. How would you say that is going? How equitable is this distribution?
We can not say that the equity is being considered in the distribution of relief items, because we have some places and districts where we are getting reports that they are receiving the relief items. And so through social media, including some chiefs coming into social media, we know we have seen one chief lamenting that there's not much going to his area. As one of my colleagues has said, in the report, we have government coming in, and we also have citizens, the different institutions and companies are coming in to support. We think it's important to coordinate. Otherwise, the right that the other communities are omitted or forgotten are not receiving much, and there could be duplication in some other areas. And I was speaking, when you could not hear me, I said we not only look at the physical road which has been there, but from the health sector point of view, we are also looking at trauma people have gone through, how much psychosocial support is provided, and we have people who are on chronic illnesses. We can give examples of diabetes, hypertension, children's age, whose medicines were swept away and the documentation were also swept away. Who want them we have been advocating that these should be helped as much as quickly as possible so that they go back on the medication. So we can say at the moment, we really need some coordination on whoever presently comes in to support.
I see, Georgia, I could barely hear you at some point, so feel free to point out anything I missed while we have this discussion. In the meantime, I'll move on to Mbao now. Mbao, you talked about how the community is rallying around one another. Talk to us about some of the things that they are doing to help themselves.
I know of families that decided maybe to feed 100 people. You took all your old clothes, blankets, everything. People just came together in a very amazing way. People gave money. They gave about 100 million within a week. And these are ordinary citizens, a little there, here, a little there. Those in the diaspora, they came together and really helped, because it is something that I've never seen, even myself, in my whole life. So the way that people came together, because every one of us was surprised. And there are people who will be destitute even forever, because you have to understand that some of these, they built their houses in reserves. And these reserves, I don't think government is going to allow them to go back there. So as Maziko was saying, they will have to find somewhere to go, and they still need a lot of support. But the citizens gave whatever little they had, even if it's just for one meal for a person. People managed to do that. I read somewhere of a vendor who only had a packet of sugar and soap, and he gave that. And that was appreciated by everyone, because everyone felt they had to do something. All of us were shocked, and we felt that we have to assist those who have literally lost everything. And when I say everything, I mean it, literally everything. Where their houses used to be, there's nothing but mud now.
And that's the humanity in us, isn't it? But, you know, like you have rightly said, both you and Maziko have mentioned the fact that people will need to find places to go now. In the meantime, a lot of people are squatting in schools and in churches. But I want us to focus on, you know, education post the cyclone. How did it impact it? How is the country recovering from that? How are children being catered to or for as far as the educational needs are concerned? Mbao, what would you say to that?
I would say there's going to be an imbalance, because this happened in the southern region mostly, and the children in the other regions, we have 3 regions, center and north, those ones were still going to school. But the ones in Blantyre especially, and the areas in the southern region, they didn't go to school, and for some, their schools are now like shelters. But they'll still be expected to write like the very same exams. We're having national exams in June, from March up to June. And all these children are supposed to write the very same exams, but those in the southern region, there will be an imbalance. I really don't know how government is going to work on that, but there are some children who have, like in this region, who haven't been to school and who still find it difficult to go to school. We also know some children who are in school in the other regions. They failed to come home during the holidays because they no longer have any homes.
Well, so can we, Mbao, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can we say that schools in this area are still closed and the children are not receiving education as of now?
There are some. Those in private schools, they're okay, but some where people are sheltering, definitely they're not going back to school. And they'll also be opening on the 17th, some of them. So what happens then? The children are already psychologically traumatized. They have no homes. They're coming from camps. It will be very difficult for them to readapt and go back to some semblance of normality.
Well, and I can imagine that there is much more on their minds than school. But let's turn attention to Maziko now. Maziko, you said you've been collecting some numbers in Blantyre already. In terms of breaking down the numbers, the number of deaths, people who have been displaced, children who cannot go to school or receive health care because of this, what are the numbers saying to you?
Yeah, for example, for Blantyre, they're trying to decommissioning and creating other waiting shelters for those, because they have to open schools, because most of them, I think, are in schools. So what we observe that most of the school-going children are going to school, because it also takes a little while to make sure that all those schools, for example, they have to be cleaned. They are supposed to be decommissioned properly so that they can go back to school. And in terms of the numbers, most of the, as you know, for example, for Blantyre, which I'm more familiar because I'm closer to Blantyre as well, we found out that most of the students have gone to school, most especially the schools where I think those people have been housed. That's why government moving so faster to make sure that they create other waiting shelters so that they can go there and so that the school children can go back. So I'm going to visit.
Hello, Maziko, are you still there? I think we lost Maziko for
areas, but the government is trying to do commissioning those.
I see. Maziko, we lost you for a bit. And so here's my follow-up question to how far we had you. Clearly, for a child who's lost everything, or for the orphans, like you mentioned, who lost their parents in this, going back to school isn't priority number one. But clearly, the government needs to do something to ensure that children who have no guardians at this moment, children who have lost a lot, can be able to reintegrate into the society at large and get the educational and health needs and societal needs that they should be having as children. What are your suggestions right now as to what governments should do? Because I have read over and over again, it doesn't seem that there's a plan there right now. Any suggestions, Maziko?
Yes, when we had interaction with the district council, which looks at these centers and live in Dodma, we had this interaction to say what would be the mechanism, because some of the children is like they don't have a home. Already they have lost everything, and for example, the ones who lost the both parents, it means he has no home. Others, they do have relatives and others whom they can interact, but others completely, they don't have. So we are trying to see, that's why the data will inform which ones, because not everyone, because others have moved and found other rental, because we had two groups of people. Others were property owners, landowners, others were people who are renting in those places. So we're to establish, when time goes, we'll be able to know which ones, and also how many children in those families, they will need to be moved to others. Because what I got from some of the waiting shelters, the schools, is that others were going to say I'm leaving, but they'll end up coming back to the centers after some days, because maybe they could not fit into the other families which they are trying to go. So those are some of the key challenges which I think the government need to work on, and having this important data and be able to distinguish which ones are most needy, and also which ones can have a temporary shelter somewhere, and which ones can be housed. So yeah, we are still in that discussion. As Babu has mentioned, that the government didn't prepare for this, so it took them as a shocker.
I see. I'll bring in George now, and we'll talk about the health system. Prior to Cyclone Freddy, Malawi was already reeling, and cholera that ravaged many parts of the country, killing at least 1,000 people, if I remember the numbers correctly. Now that you have a climate event as this that also brings on the people its own health needs, I can only imagine that the health system is overwhelmed and is very challenged. But put that into words for us. How is the Malawian health system faring?
This is a big blow because the cyclone hit Malawi when the cholera cases were getting low, and we had the hope that they would be out of the challenges. Now, some health facilities have been affected. For example, most 65 health facilities have been affected, and 29 of them would require repair. The road network, which Imbao has mentioned, is also affecting referral to take the patients from lower level health facilities to, for example, this hospital, central hospital. With the flooding of water, the damages on water systems and water sources, we see a threat of waterborne diseases like cholera again, but we see a lot of awareness raising, which at the moment is being emphasized by the Ministry of Health and different partners. We can stand out. But the health work, it has been a big problem. The delivery has also been affected. It brings some of the affected health part of the field of the victim.
I say, Mbawa, you want to take a dig at that question just before, I move on to something else?
I would just say that, as my colleagues have already said, we're very grateful to the other countries, the way they rallied behind us. It showed that there is the love, the Ubuntu is still there in this region. And also, we're still calling on for more help because definitely it's a crisis. And I was shocked today, as I said, that I couldn't go where I wanted to go. And this is right in the heart of town. I had to turn back because of the road network. There is where there used to be a road, there is just this very big hole. And you have to pass through a river or something like that, and I just couldn't do that. I had to turn back. So it is a very serious problem, and definitely we still need all the help that we can.
Indeed, you do. But I want to talk. We have talked a lot about the physical assistance that is needed, but I want us to also touch briefly, and Mbao, this is for you, on the need for trauma assistance as well for those who have seen their loved ones washed away, those who cannot find their parents or children or relatives in any form. How important would it be for the Malawian Risk and Disaster Management Agency to look into providing some trauma assistance for these people?
That one was already catered for. We saw some psychologists, some people who work in mental health. They actually volunteered themselves, and they're working in the camps to ensure that the people transition to this new reality that they're in. But that is definitely something that is already happening.
I see. How would you say that is going so far? How helpful is it being, or could it be to the people?
It will be more helpful if they could manage to get into the hard-to-reach areas. As I said, there are some areas which are still not reachable. So even if you had the heart to go and assist the people, there is no road to go where they are. So they will have to wait until maybe afterwards, and hopefully within the community, they will come together and help one another as much as they can. You have to understand these are people who there's only like one person left in a family, 4 are gone, others are missing. At least if you know they're dead, that's good, but you know that these people don't know where their relatives' bodies are, some of them. So this is a very long-term thing, and definitely it's very traumatic for us.
I see. Maziko, two of the things that, I'm sorry, someone would have to mute so that we can have a, very brilliant discussion as we wind down. Maziko, I want us to talk about time and money. Time is something we may be able to do something about, and it would seem that things are moving quite slowly with the excuse that nobody planned for this natural disaster. It's taking us by shock, and so we're doing what we can. Is there any way at all, is there any challenge at all that is causing what appears to be the slow movement of things for the people who survived this, including data collection, really?
Yes, indeed. For example, on data collection, we would expecting that by now we would have that comprehensive data. But I know because of migration, but also we are living in a world where people maybe cannot tell the truth. And maybe also government is trying to grapple with that information. But we as civil society, what we're trying to do is we want to have credible data because we know that data will help, more especially the needy. I've mentioned of Sustain and other young people who are really in need. And you can even cry when you see them because they are nowhere to go. So those are the people whom we need to make sure that they are well supported, and the ones which are supported somewhere, they can also find another way where they can be supported. So yeah, it's a tough order, but the most important thing is to have the data which is verifiable so that the ones who are in need, they should be supported.
I see. We'll see how quickly the government moves in that regard. But I'll bring in George now. George, George, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
I almost thought that something else got your attention in the background, but I do want us to look at just a few other matters as we wind down. One of it being where the people move to now. If these disaster zones are no longer habitable for them. What are your suggestions to the government about where displaced people, a lot of them really, can move to now?
We have places that almost every year are affected by floods. Of course, the degree this year has been bigger. For such places, it is really very important for government to ensure everyone moves out. There have been reports before that other people have refused to move. When they have been affected by the floods like this, they accept, but soon after they want to remain there. But the lesson this year is that everyone must be forced to move out of such places. Then we have other places that did not expect. Everyone in Malawi did not expect them to be affected. Because we had the mudslides happening from mountains. In which case, there's a lesson that our mountains are accumulating water. It would be important for the geological department in the government to assess water accumulation in our mountains, so that there could be ways to ask people if there's a threat to move away, or if there would be a way of drilling some pipes so that the water from such mountains can be, released back and back. These are some of the initiatives that need to happen. But for the flood areas, it should be a must for people to move to our land.
Yeah, so what I'm asking is, if they are moving, where are they going to? I'm not sure I caught that in your submission.
That should be the duty now of government to identify. We have some other areas that are not yet inhabited. It would be important to move them to such other places. Malawi is not fully filled by people. So there will be a lot of support required, rebuilding for the people, and also ensuring amenities are made available, like the schools, facilities, and the water sources are made available. But we have some upland places that can be identified and people move to.
I see. Mbao, as we wind down and, Malawi comes out of this 155 million at least in dollars worth of disaster, what are some of the lessons that you're hoping that the people, the government have learned?
I think the best thing is that there should be enforcement. People build their houses in places where they're not supposed to. The biggest impact was in a place where people built into a reserve, a forest reserve, and you find that the utilities are provided for such people. So I'll go back to what George was saying, that these people have to move. And when they try to go back, then it should be clear that nobody is willing to help them, because the magnitude could have been less if some had not built their houses right on top of the mountains. So enforcement is very important, and also people, now that they have seen how serious things can get, maybe on their own, they will finally move out.
I see. Maziko, I ask you the same things. What are some of the lessons that you hope that the government has learned, particularly in disaster management, because you never know what could happen next?
Yes.
And also, as you tell us that and we wind down, do add where you think people can go in, pitch in for the $155 million that UNICEF is calling for to assist Malawi. How can people help?
First of all, I think I will make mention of the data. We have to clean up our data so that we identify the real victims to the response. But also, as Mbao has mentioned, we also need to make sure that enforcement of regulations, more especially in flood-prone areas, people need to follow the regulations, because if people don't follow the regulations, then we'll keep on having all these a year and out, and we do not serve the purpose. So I'm hoping this is a lesson which all of us were learning, that when government has told us not to settle in areas which is disaster prone, we should not, because it's costing a lot. It's costing the country, it's costing the families, it's costing disturbance of so many. For example, our fiscal space at the moment is disturbed. When I was talking with the Minister of Finance during this period, he was making mention that his fiscal space is so compromised now. He has to revisit his budget and see how best he can also fine-tune some of the areas, more especially on disaster. On the issues of disaster under Dodma, there's need a lot of improvement. We have had these cyclones and disasters, floods. I think the time has come now to put disaster as part and parcel of our life, because the climate change issue is also a big issue, which I think another day we will discuss the climate injustices, because we are suffered all these things because of the climate injustice, which as a country we are suffered because of other countries. So also make sure that issues of climate change have been tackled, and but also early warning signs. If our meteorological department are telling us the signs on climate, we also need to adhere to what they are giving us, because they give us the real facts on the ground. Thank you.
I see. I was also asking, how can people help? Where do they go to support Malawians?
Yes, I think what we need to do is, that's why I think data is important. We need to establish, for example, when I went there with some district council officials with Dodma, we found out that others were renting, as mentioned earlier. It was not their places, they just renting. Others, it was their own homes, and we just support. So I think a proper documentation of people using IDs and other mechanisms of making sure that we identify the right people.
All right, Maziko, what I'm asking is, I'm sorry, we have very little time, but what I'm referring to is for people who would want to donate, where can they go to do that? Is there a national number or contact that people can go to donate and do stuff like that? Well, I think we lost Maziko's attention, and so I'll move on to Imbawe. Imbawe, if you know.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, he's back.
Now I see you're pushing the question back to Maziko. Maziko, if you know, how do people donate? That's what I'm asking. Well, Maziko is not there. But Mbao, do you know this information, how people can reach out to the Malawian government, how people can reach out to, non-profit organizations within the country to help out? Is there any system of that sort?
I do not have the numbers, but we know that you can go through the Department of Disaster Management Affairs. They have a website, they have their pages on Facebook. This can be easily accessed. You can reach out through our ambassadors in your countries. You can reach out to our private citizens who are also doing a great job in the diaspora. It's all over. Just Google Cyclone in Malawi. Definitely the numbers of those who are helping.
Absolutely.
We have UNICEF, we have Oxfam, we have Action Aid right in this country. All these are assisting in their own ways. So definitely the funding will reach the right people sooner or later.
That's fantastic. Thank you, lady and gentlemen, for your time here on the square. I totally appreciate your insight on the subject matter, and we wish you and your country folk the very best.